I'm particularly troubled at the moment by the repeated mention in the media and by all sorts of people of so-called vaccine passports. Now, the only reason we've ever had passports for immunisations, prove you've been immunised against certain diseases, are those when the disease is extremely lethal, something like yellow fever, and when you might otherwise bring back to a community that has no immunity whatsoever a really dangerous pathogen. So if you want to go to certain parts of the world where yellow fever is present, you need to be vaccinated, one, to protect you from a disease that might kill you, and two, to make sure you don't bring it home to people in a community where there's no yellow fever, and so of course there's no immunity to it. You might have a little card that says you were immunised once for life for yellow fever. That doesn't tell you need a passport against a common and garden respiratory virus. Let me just explain why. If you're an elderly and vulnerable person, you've chosen to be vaccinated, you are now protected against that virus. It doesn't matter what anyone around you is doing, whether they've got the virus or not got the virus. You've got your armour on. You don't need to see anyone else's vaccine status. You don't need to know anything about them. If you're a younger and fit person, you've looked at the literature and decided rightly you don't need to take a vaccine because you've got perfectly good immunity of your own, you too don't care what the immune status of anybody around you is. So you don't need to know vaccine passport status. So I've just explained someone who's been vaccinated doesn't need to see someone else's vaccine passport, and someone not vaccinated doesn't need to see anyone else's vaccine passport. They don't provide you with any safety at all. They're not required at all. What they provide, though, is complete control over your movements to whoever controls the database that your vaccination status is connected to. Let me just quickly explain it. I hope you grasp this, because this is not optional. This is what's going to take over your life in a way that George Orwell in 1984 didn't even dream of. Imagine you've been vaccinated and you've been awarded a vaccine passport on an app. It's going to be the world's first database that contains your name, a unique digital ID in the same format as absolutely everybody else on the planet, on the same database, and it'll have like an editable health-related flag that will say thumb up that you've been vaccinated, or maybe a red flag if you haven't been. Now, the algorithm, the rules that works out what you can do with or without your vaccine passport, that's what's going to control the rest of your lives until you die. So you might think, oh, that's an exaggeration. They're only going to need vaccine passports perhaps to enter a sports ground or a big public building like a museum. That might be true initially. But imagine if they say, now you need your valid vaccine passport to enter any large shopping complex, and then every large store. That's going to provide a coercive pressure on people who've chosen not to be vaccinated. They'll have to get vaccinated. Now, it's an illegal thing for your government to coerce you to accept any medical treatment, and it's against the Nuremberg Code that was put in place after the Nazi doctors were convicted of performing experiments on people, including lethal experiments. That prevents you coercing people to take experimental therapies, because they're taking part in a medical experiment against their will. But if this vaccine passport system is up and running, and you're told, say, that you can't enter any shop at all without beeping your vaccine passport, now you can't enter any retail establishment. You can't control what those rules are. You've no idea who's setting those rules. Don't allow this system to come into force. It's going to be used to coerce you. And let me just give you another example. You know those variants and the top-up vaccines I spoke about? I believe if you allow vaccine passports to come into force, you'll be pinged one day and it'll advise you to go to the medical centre to have your top-up vaccine. And if you choose not to, your vaccine passport validity will expire, which means you won't be able to enter a shop. You may not eventually be able to use your bank card. All somebody needs to do is set a rule that says, as after a given date, before any bank card can be used, a vaccine passport has to be beeped onto the card reader. So just take it from me, you don't need vaccine passports. They provide nothing whatsoever to you or anybody else in relation to safety, but it will give away to whoever controls that database and the rules complete control over everything you do. Let me give you one last example. You're owning this vaccine passport and it pings, and in addition to advising you need to come to the health centre for your top-up vaccine, perhaps your second one in a year, it also advises you that you need to bring your small grandchild down because your daughter hasn't brought the little lad in yet. And they say if you don't bring that grandchild down, your vaccine passport will expire and that of your daughter as well. Now try resisting that. Simply think. This system is being put in place using lies, and it's being put in place using lies for some purpose, and I believe that purpose is complete totalitarian control. And I think the purpose of that is going to be mass depopulation. I can't think of a single benign interpretation for the simple creation of these top-up vaccines, let alone the lies that surround them. And I'm absolutely terrified that the combination of vaccine passports and top-up vaccines is going to lead to, mass depopulation, deliberate execution, potentially of billions of people. You can stop it. Once you've heard what I'm saying, even if you like the idea of vaccine passports, put the damn thing in place using written records or something that'll allow you to show you've been vaccinated, but do not allow it to be on an interoperable global fixed format database, because that will be the end of human freedoms, and I just see no way of recovering from that once the system's up and running.